With the anime of Kinnikuman's Perfect Origin arc just around the corner, now is a good time to go over why anyone who enjoys Kinnikuman should make sure to read the 2011 revival or watch the upcoming adaptation. Light spoilers ahead for both. For anyone familiar with Kinnikuman's original run but somehow unaware of this, the manga was revived from 2011 and is still ongoing. The Perfect Origin arc being set a year after the manga's original ending, and acts as the rarity of a far later continuation improving on the original in every way, to be what is perhaps the best story arc in the series. Beyond how things such as the fates of the characters who appear in Nisei lining up with this, that could be something very subject to time, quite literally with the current arc, what Yude Tamago learned from their prior arcs has made for what is the perfect, pun slightly intended, arc. To start off, it plays to the original manga's strength, and fixes one of the few things Nisei didn't do so well, in having a varied cast of characters have their time in the spotlight, in fights that add more to their characters. In particular, giving more attention to the Akuma Chojin allows for many characters who were at most two-dimensional gimmicks, such as Spring Man or Sneegator, to become fairly fleshed out. The main characters also all get major additions to their character arcs, in both growth or deeper insight into their characterization in prior arcs. Buffalo Man's complex return to the Akuma Chojin, in wanting to shoulder the weight he knows will be difficult for the idol Chojin, that line up with what Ataru preached about true friendship power, being a good example of the former, while an excellent example of the latter is how Robin Mask's arc from the 20th Chojin Olympics to his return to the Seigi Chojin being fully explored, along with the truth being brought to light on how his supposed inability to fight again was dropped. Speaking of which, the Perfect Origin arc is a great example of how to do a retcon. Many view this as an inherently negative term through poor retcons, whereas the actual term is far more neutral. Two examples of how Perfect Origin does retcons, well, perfectly, would be Silverman's history and the Perfect Chojin in general. What was told of Silverman and Goldman's battle were events eons in the past, with information obviously becoming muddled over time to the point any new change is very understandable. This also ties into how the origins of the Kinniku clan in the Throne arc contradict elements of what the Golden Mask arc said, as both are incomplete myths about the same root history. As for the Perfect Chojin, the reveal of Neptunekin's lies allows for this arc to flesh out the Perfect Chojin ideology. The original run didn't do much to make them seem like any more than sore losers who can't take a black mark on their record. Here, how the Perfect Origin relates to all this concisely lets the audience understand why one may want to follow the Perfect Chojin ideology, as well as provide concrete world building that could be hit or miss in past arcs. The events surrounding the Perfect Origin also have elements only given offhand mentions in past arcs, be brought to the forefront rather than having something new appear out of nowhere, with characters only mentioned as distant figures, such as Justice or Chojin Enma, finally being brought into the main plot. Unless speaking for Toei's version of the Scramble for the Throne, which dropped the ball there. Perhaps the biggest good retcon to the series though is it being revealed the burning inner strength and friendship power are actually synonymous, which not only makes it understandable how Kinnikuman could beat so many strong opponents in the Survivor match with only one of the two to rely on, but adds to it being far less of a cop-out than in other series to utilise friendship power. Some may see this as contradicting what happened to Kinnikuman's burning inner strength against Mixataite, but how the mysterious element of it, along with the arc highlighting it to merely be the first step to surpassing the gods, imply them to essentially be a yin and yang to one's full potential. Both sides of this ability are explored more thoroughly as a plot device in this arc than prior, when it comes to the mechanics behind them, that make it an in-universe science to some extent, when it comes to why the titular antagonist group can't make use of it, rather than a magical plot buff, that at the best of times before was a manly friendship, and at worst a plot convenience. Having mentioned manly friendship, Kinnikuman is well known for pioneering a more masculine image within the shonen demographic that Hokuto no Ken would perfect a few years later. Its displays of manly heroism and camaraderie is yet another thing the Perfect Origin improves, with the deeper look into the history of the Akuma Chojin, which highlights the bonds of camaraderie and mentorship that was few or far between for them initially, along with the deeper look into the series staples such as Robin Mask or Ramen Man, who show the need to perfect oneself through loss in allowing their old ideologies to be remolded and become their ideal self. There's their Neptune Man sticking by the Perfect Chojin faction, in a display of sticking by one's principles regardless of the difficulties involved. The deeper exploration of all these characters allow for the inspirational moments to be more refined displays of masculinity than prior, which help one of the series' strengths shine even greater. When it comes to ideologies, it isn't just the typically villainous groups that are given more insight, but even the Seigi Chojin are explored deeper than simple value of justice, in a manner that highlights the spiritual aspects of the series more. Their goal of understanding their opponents through battle isn't just consistent with how the Chojin Olympics and the mercy showed at the end of the scramble for the throne went, but is very much rooted in both Buddhist and Taoist martial arts principles that should be a very familiar Budo to those fond of Dragon Ball, in which the series storytelling, also being primarily through battle, has both series live by the idea that one can only truly know a person through battle. This makes sense with how, despite the series' cosmology drawn a lot from Christianity and Greco-Roman aesthetics, it draws equally from Budo-Taoist ideas, such as the entire concept of Chojin Enma, or the pantheon of Chojin gods still being those who can be surpassed by mortals. It's through this deeper exploration of the Justice Chojin through battle that greater ties into the manga's spiritual focus are found, that flesh it out as an ideology even more. On the subject of how fights go, the refined art and paneling really help the choreography of fights go from what was good to peak. No, not in the Zuma lingo way. I mean, this here is peak. Peekaboo, to use his legal name. His fight with Kinnikuman helps show how Yuda Tamago haven't lost their touch and, if anything, have a greater understanding of how to handle their characters than ever, after having learned all 100 of Kamehameha's techniques and mastered the greatest of the Kinniku clan's moves in the battles with Omega Man and Super Phoenix. Kinnikuman has such skill and versatility by the end of the original run that finding ways to challenge him would be difficult. This is a common issue with shonen sequels, or continuations beyond the strong ending, that either have a new far stronger threat appear without any foreshadowing, or have the protagonist's skills be nerfed far beyond what's reasonable. Kinnikuman vs Peekaboo avoids these problems, as not only has Kinnikuman been absent from real battles by enough he needs a warm-up, but how Peek's ability to perfectly learn another's techniques make him someone who only gets stronger the more flashy techniques are used against him. It's through this that the fight becomes the perfect back-to-basics approach, in Kinnikuman falling back on the basic moves that naturally became far less used, as he focused on new finishers and submissions to create the perfect example of a fight that actively challenges an experienced protagonist, avoids power creep, and brings them back to their roots. The aftermath of this difficulty also leads into Suguru's character regressing as the feats of the perfect Chojin destroy his confidence before regaining it prior to the fight with Nemesis, in a way that's natural for his character, rather than a forced way to capture character traits they've grown beyond. Speaking of Nemesis, he is one of the major standouts of the arc, and shows another point in how much better the series' writing of antagonists has become. As I said in my first Kinnikuman video, the villains of the original run that weren't redeemed were serviceable as thematic foils rather than in terms of characterization, wherein they were fairly basic. Nemesis, however, holds nuanced motivations that are at times understandable for one with his experiences, that also show the faction war between Justice, Devil, and Perfect Chojin isn't as black and white as it used to seem. As an opposition to Kinnikuman, he is also an ideological escalation on what Super Phoenix was, with this being a legitimate member of the Kinniku clan, more talented than Suguru, but held back by placing his ideals above all to the point his talent becomes a double-edged sword. Without spoiling too much, Nemesis and Suguru also reflect each other, since whereas Nemesis had a noble personality that was broken down into a cynical one from his mistreatment and injustices, Kinnikuman persevered through his own mistreatments to go from a cowardly oaf to one truly worthy as a kin. His and Suguru's fight being the penultimate fight rather than the climactic one also adds into the other thing great about this arc's handling of villains, Akuma Shogun's return and conflict with the man. Now you're a man! Not only shows the nuances in Akuma Shogun's motivations through setting aside his differences with the Seigi Chojin, despite still disagreeing with their ideology, but makes the arc's climax be a natural evolution of character motivations, rather than placing the series' protagonist into it because the world revolves around him, making the last stages of the arc more like something such as the Yorknu or Chimera Ant arcs of Hunter x Hunter, rather than the standard shonen to have emerged after Kinnikuman. Both Akuma Shogun and the man have their motivations fleshed out incredibly well with the history behind them, helping connect questionable parts of the Golden Mask arc, such as how Goldman had a history with the Akuma Chojin before it. Add more rationale behind his issues with the Seigi Chojin, and his prior role adds layers to his desire to stop the man, one whose inability to change and only stagnate in his ideology being opposed by one who sunk to even lower depths, and from it knows more than anyone the need to end the system tied to their history. It's through their history, and the deeper examinations of their philosophy than the 80s run provided, that Akuma Shogun is brought from a very basic villain with a quick redemption, to perhaps the most complex character in the franchise, while the founder of the Perfect Origin is a classic tale of one with good intentions becoming what they tried to prevent due to a static existence of unwillingness to consider the deeper worth in those beyond his chosen few. On the subject of their two strongest members, the Perfect Origin function excellently as an antagonistic group of characters, with each having varied reasons for sticking by the man or opposing him that add more to his own character through their perspectives. In much the same way the Gold Saints in Saint Seiya's Sanctuary arc present a variety of motives and perspectives that deepen Saga's character beyond what his screen time allowed. I'd say the Perfect Origin accomplishes this even better though, through time being given to exploring their motives, changes, and history being developed more, even when not directly within the perspective of a character fighting them. As a consequence of these conflicts, major changes also come to the series. For instance, the changes to the Chojin graveyard fixes the conveniences towards how the series handled resurrection, and makes the losses in the arc far more severe than prior. Perhaps the biggest consequence though is the ideological changes for the characters involved and the audience through how the Justice, Devil, and Perfect Chojin interact, their battles breaking the typical face and heel attitude of the series' wrestling narrative provided prior, without Without major spoilers as to how this plays into the conclusion of the arc, an earlier example of this would be Atlantis vs Marlin Man, in which the former is cheered on by a boy called Paul, before telling him cheering for an Akuma Chojin isn't something he should do. Not only does this highlight the heel role accepted by the Akuma Chojin, despite what complexities may exist in their individuals, but be the first major sign in this arc of conflict becoming less those of purely good and evil groups, and those of different perspectives, each with their own truths and flaws, that are a very consistent display of Kinnikuman's core themes under the lens of Yuda Tamago being far more experienced people than in the 80s. If the use of friendship within the original run was a crucial message of unity, the outcome of the Perfect Origin arc is an appeal to open discussion amongst those of different ideologies or backgrounds, rather than merciless conflict. Also, their fight gives me the excuse to do this edit. To summarize, Kinnikuman's Perfect Origin arc expands on or fixes elements of the series' writing, offers more varied character perspectives, and a more nuanced display of the factions that is a natural evolution of where the manga left off, making it the gold standard for any revival of a franchise aiming to deepen what came before while staying true to their identity. Thank you if having watched through this video. Check out my previous Kinnikuman analysis if you haven't already. Like and subscribe to help us reach other fans of the series through the algorithm, and let's try to make the series well known enough for far more people to be aware of how much of a triumphant return the Perfect Origin arc is. If there's enough demand, I'll also cover the other arcs in Kinnikuman's revival run, so do tell me if interested.